This is ACOFAE. Laura Marie and Jessica Marie proudly present A Court of Fandoms and Exploration, a podcast. Fair warning, everything the hosts say is explicit, full of spoilers and adult content and shall not be used against them. They have opinions. Let's try not to drag anyone for expressing themselves and just have fun for an hour. We all deserve it.
This episode contains spoilers from The Wizard's Brew by Jordan Reed, as well as mentions from The Dresden Files, Arrow, and Supernatural. For full list, please see show notes. There are also discussions surrounding addiction.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to A Court of Fandoms and Exploration, your weekly deep dive into the fantasy, literature, and fandoms that we love. I'm Laura Marie.
And I'm Jessica Marie.
And today we are discussing The Wizard's Brew by Jordan Reed. And why are we doing this? This is very interesting. Okay. It's January. Things are weird. The weather is weird. Politics are weird. So let's make it weirder and discuss things that aren't in our, I'm going to use the word echo chamber because that's what I was thinking of earlier, because it is important to make sure that you are not surprised by things like elections and you step out of your echo chambers and you really try to see if experiencing new things that are not familiar could be something that you could enjoy. So hence this episode on The Wizard's Brew. Why is this out of our kind of wheelhouse? Well, we have a man as an author. We have a
What is a man doing
What's
here?
a man doing here? We have a man as a main character. And we have just like, men in general. We have men gnomes kind of running things here. And there are female characters, but the men are the stars here. And that is not typical. So, we're exploring, we're pushing boundaries. We are, out of our comfort zone, feeling a little bit weird, embracing the vibes because you know what? January is weird.
January is weird, but I think it also shows that we're willing doesn't necessarily mean that we'll love it, but willing to explore outside of our genres that we typically cover. We started a little bit last year when we challenge each other for our respective Jessica and Laura's genre episodes, where we cover titles that are outside of the genre that we typically cover on the podcast, and that we're just kind of going in that same vein because we also explored it for books that we are thankful episodes, where we are thankful for books outside of, again, the genre we typically cover. But for this episode, this is a fantasy genre that we would typically cover, but it being a male author and being a crime procedural, kind of falls out of the vein of what we haven't explored in the past. So, but Laura, you are familiar with crime procedurals for books, right?
This is a great question. Okay, so I would like to draw the listeners' attention to The Dresden Files. The Dresden Files are a book series, of course, but also a very short-lived TV show that starred Paul Blackthorne. We love him from Arrow, but The Dresden Files is a crime procedural where a detective investigating supernatural activities in modern day Chicago. That's The Dresden Files. That is what I am familiar with. That's kind of what I grew up on. I watched that. It's only 12 episodes. The second season wasn't picked up by Sci-Fi when it got canceled. Boo-hoo. Because fantasy shows get canceled in general. In general, it doesn't really matter what's going on there. Fantasy shows, for the most part, get canceled. So it was then very interesting to come to this book series or to this book and have it also be a crime procedural, because let me tell you something, Jessica Marie, it is a different animal reading a crime procedural than it is watching a crime procedural, even though they follow the same
patterns.
Yes.
I was going to say they follow the pattern, because this book certainly did. This book definitely does. And then even with, you take a step back from the book, you are on record on the podcast saying how we will meet the culprit at the beginning of a crime procedural, and that is solidified at the end, and you're like, and it always makes sense. But that being said, full disclosure, I've never read a crime procedural. I love them. I've watched them, put on an SVU, put on Chicago PD, put on any of like a Dick Wolf show basically. And I am sad. I love them. But reading it was a different beast, and it was a challenge for me. Full disclosure. But I think if you were the one, Laura, who said this would be great on TV, because I'm thinking there's a lot of exposition that would be able to be removed because it would all be in the background. You're all visualizing it. It's just a different conversation, because with traditional fantasy, I'm like, nom, 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 eat it up. I read every word, all of the details. But because maybe it's a crime procedural that also feels very present day, I was like, it took me a minute, even though it's a pretty quick read.
We both did this through audio, and at like 2.5, it's like 4.5 maybe hours. But it is, I'm going to say it's like a thick 4.5 hours. At like
4 hours of my life.
Yeah, like 2.25. There's just a lot going on, because it is a self-contained mystery with like 3 or 4 big plot lines. But it is like the start. You can tell it's like the start of like an anthology for this character, which is like fun to kind of think about, because the same thing is being done with Ninth House, in the exact same thing pretty much now. Exactly. So it is interesting. I also think, yeah, Jess, as you said, this would be really great on TV. I think the solving, I don't know, the like skeptical scientist with the like hard-nosed detective. I think they make a good team. And I like all the gnomes, and I like the gnome politics that are there, and like, Potion Alley and everything that's going on. I think visually it would be very interesting to see little details like Alyssa has magic that prevents the ash from all of the chimneys from getting on her, and it just kind of like floats off of her, and other people have to wear like cloaks and hats and things. Like little details like that I think are very fun. And also on a reread, I mean, it's all there, obviously, on a reread, because it always is, especially in a crime procedural. But in the reread, I kind of really saw why this book was kind of interesting to me, because I was interested in all of these kind of plot devices. And here's the thing. When we talk about books like Serpent and Dove, where all of these things like sound excellent, and then you put them together and the mix just isn't like awesome. That's kind of what I felt like here. I kind of felt like I wasn't able to really dig in and get immersed in this world, which is funny because, like, Jess, as you said, there are a lot of details. I don't know. It just seemed very gray to me. And I know it was like not. So there is that. But the crime part of it was very fun to follow for me. And I found that the characters that they met were like a fun little tapestry of like things. We go to the library, and then we go back to the academy, the institute, and then we go talk to my grandfather, and then we go here back to the Wizard's Brew. And I while we're traveling a lot, I did think that it would work on screen the same way that the magicians kind of work on screen.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
I love The Magician. That's going to make me do a rewatch, which I think we want to do that anyway. What I found entertaining with the narrator of this book, he's great with accents, and all of the accents fall into some sort of traditional stereotypes when this would be on screen. Like the detective has this, like, the 1920s Chicago detective accent, and he's like, you know, down hard and has an addiction, and is trying to manage that while solving this crime. And he was kind of out of commission for a hot second because he's working for himself. But then, you know, this happened to be a personal friend. So now he's personally, you know, just like detectives, now there's a personal interest that he's really invested into all of this. And then, like, he had different accents for the different, like, gnome mobs and ogre mobs and everything. It made it fun. It did make it fun. And I was like, you know, you kind of have to, you lean into it, right? Yeah, the narrator was good.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about plot, because here's the thing. Not a lot of people have read this book, which is bad because, you know, that's sad, but also good because we can talk about it in a way that doesn't spoil it and maybe might interest you to also kind of get out there and see if maybe a fantasy crime procedural is something that you're interested in, because, like, that is what I think this year's theme should kind of be, is like making sure that you are willing to go there to find your joy. And if you don't love where you go, that's fine. You just try again.
And it's also something that I feel like we've discussed this, and I was like, from, you know, take a step back from books, when we've had the discussion about, you know, life challenges and internships and exposure to things, the worst thing that comes out of it is you tried something and realized it wasn't for you, as opposed to, and this is just like life in general, right? What foods, activities, there's nothing to say, you know, you wouldn't like it unless you tried it. And now you're like, okay, is that for me? Because that's how so many of us have gotten into fantasy too, where it wasn't our genre. And then we're like, fine, I'll do it. And now it's the best thing ever. So it's just another subgenre within a genre that we love.
Exactly. All right. So let's talk about this book. Let's talk about this genre a little bit. So get in the mindset of like 1920s crime noir. All right. That's where we're at. And we have Zane, we have our detective, and our detective is scarred and grizzled. He's been in the war, and he has a friend, I guess, that lives inside of his head that talks to him and helps him and is sassy and has his own little personality and memories. And we sit with that for a lot of the book, and we don't really get answers, but we get some answers, and that's fun. We love a tortured detective. We love, who's also, just as you said, addicted to healing potions because he is grizzled and tortured.
Yeah, and it's I don't even want to say the focus. You know, it's funny. It's like you don't realize he has an addiction until they spell it out at the end of the book.
Say it. They're like,
hey, you need to kind of manage this. This isn't, I'm happy to help you, or we can get you some resources. And then, because I read this fully through, and then I was doing I got halfway through before we started recording for a reread. And I'm like, oh, it's all, you know, like you said, it's all there. It's him having to like, let me hit up the Wizard's Brew again. Like, let me hit up this bar. Let me make certain agreements if I can hold off till this time. But like the politics, because, you know, the politics that are in play are academic politics. And we do love that. Like, we love leaning into academic politics. And of course, it's the one person who makes not the smartest decision. And then more people get involved. and the person starts biting off more that they can chew. And then they start saying, oh, well, now too many people know. So I got to start axing them off left and right.
Well, what I think is so funny is like a lot of this plot hinges around just people being like, hey, the budget doesn't match up, which I think is very funny and like very true in an academic setting. Because like a couple of the characters are just like, hey, you're being really weird. Why are you being so weird? The budget is fine. And I like that. I like that because it's a very practical, like, no, we can just look at the paperwork, my guy. What are you doing? Like, all is good. All is good. And then also, I like this idea of this place where Alyssa, our female main character. Yeah, she's a main character. Her and Lana.
I feel like I feel like the main character wise, it's between her and Vana.
Mm-hmm. For sure. But Alyssa, she works at this like really magical, I guess, school, and it's always moving and navigating it is very difficult, but she's been there a long time. She has a tragic backstory, right? And she is able to really, because her grandfather is the head of the place, really see kind of, things that are not working and things that are weird, things that are afoot. So when she is ordered into the basement to clean things, she's like, yo, why though? Why though? Me? Why though? Alone? That's weird. And then, shenanigans occur. And here's the thing. I don't think it's a spoiler to say that because she's one of our main characters. When I was surprised that they rescued her so quickly. I don't know why I was expecting her to have more of like a harrowing experience, but like they pulled her out and I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, it was very much a, hey, she's found her. She's here.
Yep.
What happens if she's here for too long? Oh, she starves to death. Oh, okay. Well, we'll go get her now. But I don't know if it was more because she is a piece of the puzzle to move the story along and I was going to say to help Dresden, to help Zane get some of the answers that he needs because she's considered, because like Zane is also a human. Like he's the human in all of this. He's the only human in all of this. So there is a sense of credibility for her to help get the information that Zane needs because he's a human amongst fantasy creatures, and par for the course, humans aren't known to like be the most reliable, helpful, trustworthy people. So I feel like maybe that's what plays a role.
And to set this up, so the Wizard's Brew is the potions retail shop that Dennis, who is killed, who is a friend of Zane, the detective, works at. So it is right away in the plot. And that's how Zane gets roped into the Wizard's Brew and meets Vana, meets all of these people, is he's there to investigate his death because that was his buddy. And it is when we get to the Wizard's Brew, like with our detective, we're analyzing the crime scene. The second read through, I was like, oh, hello, everything. All the clues are there. It's very fun. And also, just as you mentioned, there are a lot of fantasy creatures here. The main ones being like gnomes, and elves are like kind of mythical. And werewolves are also kind of like mythical at this point. And I find that to be very, very fun. Also, the city is like full of ash and like kind of dirty. So that's our kind of like world building. And also potions, healing potions are addictive and create addicts who slurp them out of the street when shops discard them. So this is kind of like our world building, and we have our crime. And then from the initial like read through of the crime scene with Zane, from there on, we have a very standard, I think, crime procedural with its like twists and turns and fun characters, as I said. But also, and again, I don't think it's a spoiler, werewolves in a way that was obvious, but also not like unexpected. I thought it was very fun. And also like shapeshifters in general, because I think that's a scary trope.
Shapeshifting in any fantasy is always, it is a scary trope because you're just waiting and wondering if it's especially you're like, that can't be it. That's not really happening. Oh my gosh. Because it's typically done with malicious intent.
Yeah. Okay. So if we're going to briefly like go over the plot here, Dennis is murdered and our detective and everybody is off on the case. We have a double, which I think is very scary. And a couple of the characters realize that there's a double and they're so freaked out by it that they don't say anything for a while.
That's the crazy part, because again, this is, I guess you could chalk it up to like a miscommunication trope if you're like, if you just communicated, if we just talked, because I don't think anybody wanted to admit that it's worse than they could think, because they're shapeshifter. What do they call them? Polymorphism. That's when you have Vana. Well, and here's the thing. I mean, I don't know if this is spoiling it. Vana is one of our FMCs. The shapeshifter is shifting into Vana and now we have two of them. So now you have Vana 1 and Vana 2, and one of them is trying to clear the name, but questions are being dropped to see who's the real Vana, and trying to understand. Yeah, it's really about like trying to dissect and have alibis, but you're like, but wait, how do you have an alibi if I just saw you 2 seconds ago? And why do you look like this when you didn't look like that before?
Yeah, and like, why aren't you dressed like this? You're supposed to be dressed like this. Is that weird? And then the answer being like, and here's also what I think is a very important part of this book is our FMC Vana. She's like, why can't I just do and dress as I like? Why does that have anything to do with you? And of course, though, like that's part of the plot. Like that's a giveaway from the plot. So I like that it's like, but really though? Why though? And then, and let's talk about it. Let's talk about the brother. Yeah. Vana's got a brother, and he is, I'll say it, a little delusional. What do you think?
Yes, he's so unhinged.
Yeah, Moon Mother. You can't speak to the Moon Mother. Okay, so what has happened is the brother and Vana are from a noble family far from the town that they live in, and they have kind of dwindled in ancestral power over time. And the brother has consulted the bones, and like the gods have spoken to him, and like the time is now, brothers, and has kind of like built a following and has read the signs, and the signs point to Vana being the salvation of their like clan, right? Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah, and to kind of get rid of any obstacles from having that happen.
Yeah, because
Yeah, I think that's like, I'm trying to be like very strategic with the words that I'm using, because I know we're not trying to lay the whole thing out, because a lot of people haven't read this book.
Yeah, and I think that's pretty good. But let's talk about that too, because throughout the book, Vana is like, I want to find out who killed my husband.
She doesn't care about anything. Mm-mm. She's like, my sole purpose, fuck you all thinking you're going to put me on this pedestal. Fuck me being the leader of like our group of people. My only purpose is to find out who killed my husband. seek revenge on that. And third, which arguably is last, is clearing her name.
Yeah.
She knows that she's a suspect, but she's like, that is tertiary from everything.
Yeah, she's very like uninterested in clearing her name. She's like, hey, can you all wait with me while the cops come? They're going to arrest me. Can we all we have witnesses. It's very fun. But yeah, she all she wants to do is find out who took her dentist, and like mad respect for that too, because it's also here's kind of the thing I want to talk about, right? Like it's about body autonomy, right? Her body was being like used, even a double, whatever, against her will, and that's weird. And she's out to find out who that was, because that is a violation. That's a betrayal. Like, what? And then kind of compounding that, you've got her brother just throwing these like familial societal expectations on her about, you are the one that's going to lead us into the future, right? So we have one side, and then we have another side. And then right up the middle is we have her actual physical transformation that's happening. She is actually completely covered in bruises and going through a very traumatic experience as she is transforming into a different version of herself.
Very eloquently said. I was wondering if you were going to go down what the specifics were.
Yeah, and I just find that to be very complex. And when you really sit and think about what she is going through, the fact that through all of that, she is single mind focused on finding the murderer of Dennis is admirable, and also like kind of scary. Like, go off, girl.
Can't say that women don't know how to do it all.
Yeah, for sure.
She's going through all of her shit and still has her tunnel vision priority.
Yeah. But also she is active in the investigation too. She's like helpful. She's asking questions. She's observing. She is looking out and seeing what can be done. And we have Alyssa. Alyssa is also a complex female character that I want to point out too. She has a tragic backstory. Her parents were murdered. And she lives with her grandfather at her place of employment, and she has been sequestered. She's been traumatized and sequestered in that place for 10 years since it happened. And it isn't until this case that she feels motivated, obligated to break out into the new world. So this is also kind of a self-discovery journey that Alyssa is going on. And in the course of doing that, uncovers all of these men in power that have been brainwashed and memory manipulated. Like,
yes.
Talk about that.
Yes, and being denied every time that she has given direction to people, been a resource to these men, all for it to come to a head where they're being told, don't know who you are. We never worked on that. Different ways that she was undermined and dismissed.
Gaslit.
Yep.
Yeah. And she has to navigate that. And at first she's very gracious and she's like, okay, excuse. But at the end, she's like, absolutely not. Like, blah, blah. No, that is wrong. There is something going on here. And bless her grandfather does not waver. He's like, all right, gang, let's go. Like, something's going on.
He was very much like, my granddaughter does not fuck around. She does not lie, and has her support, and she has his support full-heartedly.
Yeah, and they have to go to all those trials and all those meetings, and they talk over her, and they really, really disregard what she has to say. And her grandfather is just like, hey, screw all of you. Like, that is not how things are done here. And then, of course, we have an imposter, and the imposter is like, I think it is, though. I think it is how we do it. And what are you going to do about it? Mind magic. And that is it is scary to think that the men in power can be easily manipulated like that, isn't it?
Well, and then she even like, here's the thing, you know, those glasses that she had to be like, let me just see if there's a shimmering aura. That is a woman's intuition. That is our sixth sense on paper that we could read through the bullshit.
It's like, let me see. I got my glasses on. Oh, you're full of it. All right.
You get a little twinkly going around. These might be broken, but I'm still clocking it.
We love that. And so yeah, I think we have a really interesting, like, strong female characters here. And then I really want to talk about the gnomes. We have a lot of gnome-like society, like structure building here. And I think that's really interesting. So in this series, in this book, gnomes are long-lived, and it is not unheard of for them to be in a single job for a long period of time and not advance, just stay an apprentice because of, just as you said, horrible, jealous, awful people. They don't trust the gnomes. They don't want the gnomes. They kind of see them as second, third, fourth rate citizens and boss them around. So the gnomes have their own tight-knit culture that our detective, Zane, has to kind of infiltrate and kind of work with to crack the case. And Alyssa is able to help him with that because she speaks the language. Because of course she does, Slay. Of course she does.
You know what? Every time that Alyssa was, I don't want to say exploring, uncovering information that we needed, it reminded me of Evie and the Mummy, because of course they needed a woman to like figure all this shit out.
Of course they did. It was really fun to see her kind of experience life as well. Because again, this is like her first foray into life after her deep trauma. And Zane is like, you know, I thank you so much for helping. Like they've been joking a bit about being like assistants, you know, you're my assistant, blah, 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 official investigation. He's like, you know, we had a really good day. Let me take you to lunch. And she's like, I haven't like eaten outside of like the Institute in like a really long time. What if I get sick? And he's like, you'll be totally fine. Like little things like that are so cute.
But like as somebody with IBS,
real
I'd be like, I don't know anything about this food that I am unfamiliar with. And what's the restroom situation?
He was like, it's like some of the cleanest food in the city. She's like, great, cool.
But you know, one of the other characters, I think it was Vex, specifically the gnome. He, bless his heart, his guard had to always be up for the longest time around Zane because of him being a human. And he's like, I'm onto him. I don't know why he's treating me like an equal, but that's not normal. You're a human. So I like his internal dialogue that we would hear. You're just like, oh, poor little Vex.
On the second read through, his like pumping himself up to go ask for a promotion, I'm just like, oh,
he's so, you know, if this was a TV series, he would be like, he would be the like we as like fangirls first before everything in our life. We know that he would be the fan favorite, but the execs at these studios would be like, we didn't even see that coming. And we're like, no, how did you not see that coming?
Because can't you just picture him in his like little, because it's like a little closet and he's just like putting on his outfit and like pumping himself up. He's like, you deserve this. You're a good gnome. Like, oh my goodness, you're a good gnome. Ah, yes, you are. Oh my God. It's, I think like that is, it really puts in perspective, especially on the reread, just like how divided society is and how like these people are very deserving and it's just prejudice that is keeping them down. Does this all sound familiar? This all should. I really, it is very, very poignant, very poignant. There are, of course, there are a lot of twists and turns here involving the murder weapon. The murder weapon that we haven't talked about. The murder weapon is a fae-made dagger. Another word for fae being elf here. Elves are kind of mysterious and nobody really talks about them.
And anybody can learn fae magic. Also, you don't have to be fae to learn fae magic. And elves were like, faes are derivatives of elves. Elves no longer exist at this point in this book series.
Yes.
Whatever.
And it's real interesting, this like the world building that we have there. And then through the dagger, we meet the blacksmith, and then we meet the librarian and we meet all these people that are like, that's some bad news bears right there. Like, why do you have that? There are runes on that thing. There are symbols on that thing. Like you shouldn't have that. And I don't want it in the shop. And then it is from there that we are pulled into, the brother cult, that we're pulled into, the whole idea of, bribery in academics. What a new concept, because let's all remember, this starts off by poor Dennis hyping himself up to potentially maybe have to bribe somebody to become a state mage so that really he can impress his wife. Cause she's a queen slay. And he wants to like do good by her, even though he runs a successful, potion shop, but he wants to go work for the government, become a state mage. And that's how he meets Alyssa, and Alyssa gets, familiar with him. But that academic setting, let's remember, not only gets infiltrated by mind-altering magic, but also straight up money, people. We are bribing. And
this is where the gangs are getting involved, because they're having they're the loan sharks.
Exactly. And so all of these little plots kind of coming together do get resolved towards the end of the book, but it is like a woo kind of adventure. Here's what I really like, though, is that Zane goes to the loan sharks, and the loan sharks are like, yeah, you paid off his debt, like in full, baby. We were good friends. I gave him my card. I said, call on me later. And you know what? I like you too. We can be good friends too. And Zane's like, actually, so yeah, I'll see you later.
He paid full and years ahead of me. So because the loan shark part of him is like, damn it, now I don't have all that interest I was hoping to get.
It's just very funny little like details there. Also the details of the gnomes. It is very rare for gnomes to own businesses. That couldn't possibly be important later. But that Vex's uncle has a morgue, and also there's a subplot about glass blowing and how the glass blowers are screwing over each other for competition because he wants the bigger building.
Who has the cheaper glass, the breakable glass, the unbreakable glass?
Which I have to say is a very good idea. The adventure glass. So Vex comes up with the idea that the potions for adventurers and travelers should be in glass bottles that are shatterproof. And here's the thing that's kind of sad. He goes to implement that, and other people find out and start double crossing him so that his bottles are very shatter full. And when you squeeze them even a little bit, they like explode in your hand. So he gets screwed over. Vex is like, that was my idea. And you guys ruined it. It is a really good idea, though, and I think should be implemented in other video games. I think that should be fun.
Yes, especially if you had like, I'll pay, in exchange for X, you get adventurer, shatter resistant, shatterproof, whatever you want to say, unbreakable glass potions.
Yeah, I mean that's a good idea. So I was also intrigued by that. And Also, again, I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, our detective, our male MC, our detective Zane, has a dark shadow that is kind of like with him at all points. Throughout this book, we have some flashbacks of memories of this dark shadow and of Zane encountering this dark shadow for the first time. And that, again, is where I'm like, this would be a great TV show. Like those flashback episodes where you like really dive deep into these details, I think would slap, honestly. But again, this shadow that Zane has in him speaks to him and is sassy and has his own little personality and backstory and is still with him at the end of this book. There is no resolution to that. It's not like when I say that everything is tied up at the end, the crime right. is complete because this is a detective. Our detective is still grizzled and addicted to potions and, with this dark shadow and ready, willing, and able for a new case, right? Like, come on in, we're open. That's how the book ends.
And that is kind of the MO for detective procedurals and series, right? Because I'm thinking about like you have Agatha Christie and you have Hercule Poirot and then you have
Jessica Jones.
Jessica Jones and you like there's a lot of, again, like I know examples in like television media, movie media, but from a book standpoint, I'm like, oh, there is some sort of like formulaic writing process, just like you would have it. And I'm not saying it as a bad thing. Like it's the same thing how you would have in like a romance book. Okay.
Yeah, there's a formula. My question for you, Jess, is when you were growing up, did you read Hardy Boys or like Babysitter's Club mystery? Did you read like the old school mystery books, Boxcar Kids?
Oh, I definitely read the Boxcar Kids. I read Babysitter's Club, but that wasn't really like mystery. I read Goosebumps, but even then it was like there were options at the time, which still would be cool if somebody figured out. I mean, it's figured out just like somebody did it. To choose your own of how you were going to get to the mysteries and stuff. I didn't read Nancy Drew. I'm trying to think. I read Animorphs.
Animorphs.
I don't think that was like a crime mystery solving. I didn't like Scooby-Doo, which is like, I feel like, which you would think every kid, I hate it. I was like, it's always some I mean, I also don't like horror. So that also, not that Scooby-Doo is scary, but.
Interesting.
Did you watch like any of this? Like, did you watch things like this or read things like this with your dad? Or did he like pick out books and then you would get exposed that way? Because I know your mom and your grandma really leaned into like the historical fiction of things.
I counter your questions and ask if you enjoyed Harriet the Spy.
I did like Harriet the Spy. I liked her. I liked her revenge more than the spying. I loved when she read everybody and then everybody would be like, Harriet's so mean. I'm like, why did she do that though? What did you do for her to have to pull that shit out? I was
okay.
So,
right. Not quite.
That's not the way you were going for that. And I know it was.
All right.
I feel like you're trying to
know.
like dig through something to be like, what?
Yeah, I
like
am.
the pipeline, I guess.
I am trying to discover the pipeline. You took me on a weird turn, but that is why it is fun and interesting and joyful to be friends with you, because we are still learning new things about each other after all of this time, because friends keep growing, changing, learning, and evolving and learning new things about each other at all points in your life. And if you think you know everything about somebody, then your friendship is stagnant and you should rethink that.
Wait, what was yours? Like, what was your, like, first exposure to crime?
To
I
crime?
guess. Crime procedural, not crime. I don't know.
To crime? What was my first exposure to crime? Okay. Great questions. When I was growing up, this scared my mom. When I was growing up, I needed like background noise, and it couldn't be music because I would just start like singing along to it, and it would distract me from like what I was actually supposed to be doing. So, and I would always need it at like 10 o'clock in the morning, which is like such a weird time. But you know what's on at 10 o'clock in the morning? Crime documentaries. Crime documentaries are on. So I would play those on those weird cable channels for like a couple of hours every single day. And like, so that, and those are like the serial killers, the unsolved mysteries. Actually, no, unsolved mysteries. Unsolved mysteries was it.
That shit scared me because it was right, because it's real.
Yeah.
I think that's always the part that was like, you know, even now when you have unsolved cases, like the cold cases, you're like, that person's still out there. Like, this is an actual story. That shit, I avoided that at all costs. No wonder your mom was terrified. I'm going to talk to when I see your mom, I'm going to be like, so tell me how.
She's going to be like, oh my God, it was so scary.
How old were you?
Oh, I was very young. Okay, so Unsolved Mysteries was my first exposure to mysteries. I started doing the like serial killer documentary, unsolved like serial murder thingies, when I was in middle school. What an age. What a fun age. And then mysteries, like crime mysteries. Oh, in college, I also needed background noise that wasn't music so that I could work and drown out what was going on around me. And that I settled on CSI Las Vegas. And
I loved CSI. I like CSI Miami.
Yeah. Oh, Miami. Bow. Bow, bow.
With the glasses.
With the glasses.
So
So good. Yeah. Mine was CSI Vegas with the bug guy. He Grisham, I don't know, whatever. He was my guy. So I would watch, and those were on USA, like all day.
It was just marathons.
It was just marathons.
And it's marathons of like, these are shows that had 24 episodes in a season. It was glorious.
It's glorious. Yeah. So it was CSI Vegas, and then it was Bones.
Oh, you've loved Bones for as long as I've known you.
Yeah. And then it was Bones, and then it was Fringe.
Yeah, that one too.
Yeah. But before all of this, it was X-Files.
X-Files.
Yeah. Before all of this, it was X-Files. And then, you know, modern day, it was Fringe. And now I'm not watching any sort of like supernatural mystery crime. I just finished Slow Horses, which is like the exact opposite of that. So,
well, I mean, talking about, supernatural, arguably like present day, even
saving people, hunting things. That's absolutely crime. That's crime.
Yeah, it was crime, and it was monster of the week crime. That's how it was pitched. And the first couple seasons, they're kind of like, especially the first season, it's dark. It's darker, and they're exploring the monsters and the fantasy of it. A little bit, you know,
that's like, so much. They are committing themselves a lot of crime.
Right?
Not just the monsters, they're committing a lot of fraud on that show.
Lots of fraud. And then when they escaped jail, when Jensen Crow got out of jail after they clocked him, and he had to set up his own killer, like he had to set up his own like murder, so they could never, so they can keep. Sorry, yes, supernatural spoilers. Even though but here we are.
It's been out.
Yeah, that was because then he had to like set up his own murder so he could keep on committing fraud.
Keep on committing
for 10
the
more
crime.
Years.
Yeah, he had to keep committing the crime. So saying it like that.
Yeah.
Saying it like that. We've been through the crime, right?
We have. Like, and in the fantasy realm of things too.
Yeah, we've been through the crime.
But then this goes back to what you said about Serpent and Dove, how it's all there on paper.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it just doesn't work. How interesting. What a fun perspective. You notice all those shows got canceled.
Okay, Supernatural after 15 years, like that was overdue.
It counts. It counts. It
You
happens.
need to help me. You need to buy a gun.
Please, I need your help. You need to kill me. That should happen. That should happen. All right. Okay. So as we said, this book wraps with the crime solved and our main character looking for new clients, as all crime noir ends, as all anthologies begin. So big themes here, very fun, interesting themes. And I think we did a little bit of self-exploration here at the end, discussing like where our crime background is and where you obviously diverged from everyone else. I don't really know how to take this Scooby-Doo thing.
I hated it. I know I watched it, but I'm like, if I could, I was like, okay, I was not a Scooby-Doo kid.
That's so
I mean,
funny.
I loved Daphne and like just everybody.
God, that's so funny. That is very amusing. That is very amusing. Very amusing. Okay, so let's talk about this. Let's wrap this a bit. This book, outside of our genre, talking it out, enjoyable. Would I read it again? I don't think so. I read it like 3-ish times since we first got it, and then up until now, and that's enough. That's enough. However, if more in the series were to come across my audiobook, scrolling, I would bookmark it and be like, you know what, for a rainy day, why not? Why not?
Especially if it's available at the library,
Mhm.
because I know that you shared in a previous episode that you are rebuilding your Audible library from scratch. So maybe not necessarily a credit, but like might explore it if it became available. My question to you is, if you are exploring new genres / subgenres of a genre you already love, would you recommend this as a starting point if you're looking to stay in fantasy but want to, maybe you don't want to stay in the romantasy of it but want to explore something else? Would you recommend this as a starting point for a crime procedural in fantasy?
Great question.
Or like crime procedurals in general?
Great question. Great question. It would depend on who is asking. 100%. 100%.
You're really good at tailoring for all of us.
If there was a boy that was like, I want something that isn't love, because that's hard, right? Like that romantasy is what it is.
Because you can't even say, where the detective gets the girl at the end of it. Like, that's not what this is. There's no romance in this. Right.
At all. So like if there was some like guy, and I'm using this like very generally, like some guy, some dude, some just like person that just wanted to try fantasy, dipping the toes in, that kind of came from maybe a crime background, maybe thriller, maybe chiller, maybe something else, but wanted to see like maybe crime with gnomes. What is that like? Or maybe watched The Lord of the Rings a few times and was like, I want to try something like that, the same kind of like, then sure. Yeah, absolutely. But honestly, if somebody wanted to try fantasy, I would give them The Black Witch, because I just think it is so good. The themes are so deep and poignant and just readily available if you're ready to think about them. And then as you go throughout this series, you really see like, that is like top tier fantasy for me, but that is not crime fantasy. And that is not what everyone is looking for. And I get that. And so I love that we are kind of expanding our horizons a little bit and dipping our toes in to see if like other iterations are something that we could potentially enjoy, because again, echo chambers are bad and surprising and terrible.
Well, that's one of my favorite things about, like, as we start the new year, like this, we are going into year 5 of the podcast. We've been doing this since since 2020. And even though SJM is really what spearheaded this, and I could still talk about SJM all the time. Granted, they might not be popular opinions, just opinions that I could kind of share with Laura. I love that from the beginning, it's always been about exploring different themes, exploring different conversations. And we've always kind of wanted to have that expansion in those discussions. I mean, even before we started the podcast today, we were talking about something about 2 very different movies we both saw with the same thematic elements once we were talking it out. And the first thing I said to you was, you're probably the only other person who can, like, I could share this with and not feel like dumb, basically. So I think 2025, let's see where it goes. The last time,
let's survive 2025.
Let's survive. Yeah, I think that's 2020 survive. But that being said, feel free to follow us on Instagram. We're at ACOFAE Podcast. We're also both on TikTok. For the foreseeable future, ACOFAE Laura and ACOFAE Jessica. We'll talk to y'all soon. Bye.
Bye.